Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Recovery Mental Health Clinic. My name is Zoe Clues, and I'm a hypnotherapist, and I specialise in complex PTSD, anxiety, self-esteem, and depression.
Hey Zoe, I'm Juliet Hollingsworth. I'm also a hypnotherapist. It's just two hypnotherapists today. I work primarily with anxiety, lots of other issues as well. At the moment, lots of anxiety though.
Yeah, it's rife, isn't it? I mean, how have you found this week's been in terms of clients and, the things that people have been reporting to you? Because obviously we've been released back into kind of some freedoms. We have beer gardens back, and there's been a lot of people excited, and the weather's been quite nice as well, hasn't it? How's it, talking about last week actually, but how have you found the sort of general feedback, people around you, kind of things people are talking to you about?
Yeah, I think generally good, although the thing that I'm talking about this week is social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
We've really focused up until now on the difficulties with being locked away, if you like, shut away, not allowed out, restricted, lack of choice. Now suddenly things are opening up, and people who have thrived in a locked down environment are fearful. And there's those people that have social anxiety and maybe always have and found lockdown comfortable, but there's also the people who are still incredibly fearful, who feel like we're being almost thrown to the lions, if you like, as a result of the fear campaign. And so lots of anxiety. Again, all anxiety is personal, and different people feeling different things. I think social anxiety is a topic, a hot topic.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I treat a lot of social anxiety as well. And I think, what I noticed was a lot of people, some people did feel more comfortable. They almost found it a relief, some of this. Many people have struggled as well. But, I think the most important thing with social anxiety is you are able to sort of gently, when I work with clients, it's all about gently, letting them know that it's okay for them to start to build up that confidence. And some of us will be much more confident, some of us more extrovert, some of us are more naturally introvert. And I think as long as you're getting that co-regulation in some way, because I think that's one of the things that lockdown has, and the restrictions has the way it's impacted us, we haven't been able to co-regulate, so we've been so reliant. I know I said this before, but I think it's such an important point. We've been so reliant on self-regulation, which is okay if you're a good self-regulator, but a lot of people aren't, and a lot of people haven't been able to self-regulate, and a lot of people have noticed that their issues have come up much more because they haven't been able to go out and regulate their emotions through connection with other people. And with social anxiety, what I find is people that I work with, there is often this yearning to be able to go out and connect and just have the permission actually to be themselves, because that's the most important message you can give someone, isn't it? You are enough, and give that person the message that you just being yourself is enough. And that's the biggest fear, I think, what I've noticed with social anxiety is that somehow you're not interesting enough. You don't know what to talk to people about. You go into that freeze response. And I always say to people, just ask people questions, because they're interested in themselves. You don't have to be this scintillating, witty, kind of rapier wit type person. You can if you're sincere and genuine, and people will often respond to that. You don't have to be putting on a show.
I think that, this is so true. And I'm aware of one of the questions we've got coming up, and I'm going to relate back to that. So I won't kind of speak about it now. But I think that's very true. And you reminded me something you said, something else that I've been discussing a lot, is really anxiety as a result of actually not taking enough time for yourself, which seems a little bit crazy when we've had so much time over the past year. But that seems to have been a bit of a theme the past week as well. And so I've been spending time talking about concentrating on just being, not doing all kinds of things, but giving yourself time to process your own thoughts.
Yeah, because doing is such a great anesthetic as well, isn't it? It can be, and when it's one that's rewarded as well by society, you know, it can be really easy to go into kind of like workaholism. Okay, so on that note, so talking about all these different things that have come up this week, let's jump on over to the questions that we've had in this week. So we have somebody, and I'm not sure if they're male or female because I can't tell from the email, but I've had someone who asked, "Hi, I hope it's okay to ask this question. It's about my sex drive." It's totally fine to ask that question. It's a mental health clinic. You can ask pretty much whatever you want to, as long as it's with your emotions and how you're feeling and what's going on for you. It's about my sex drive, which I've noticed has totally gone since summer last year. It coincided with me losing my job, but I don't know if that's just a coincidence. It really upsets me as my partner and I had a really good sexual relationship before this, despite being together for years. And I was always really proud of it. And I'm really concerned it's going to affect things in our relationship. I feel too embarrassed to talk to anyone about it. Okay, well, the first thing I'd say is, you know, oppression isn't really that sexy, is it? So I'm not sure how many of us have been feeling wildly sexy during these times. But I think because we don't know whether you're male or female, I think it's really important to talk from both viewpoints, you know, look at both viewpoints here. So I'm going to hand over to you, Juliet, first of all, because perhaps you want to talk from the female perspective.
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to talk generally. And I'd like to kind of recommend a book that I think is a brilliant book, and it's called Period Power by Maisie Hill. I don't know if you've read it, Zoe, or come across it. And it's in the forefront of my mind because I was also listening to her podcast earlier. And this is where, this is what I wanted to relate back. It's moving away from the sex drive for a moment. But she recently recorded a podcast on her diagnosis, though she's very clear that she doesn't like the word diagnosis. But as she explained, there's very few words that describe what she wants to say. Her diagnosis of autism. And a thing she talks about a lot in this podcast is masking, and how she's spent her whole life kind of masking and not being herself, but being having modeled herself on all of the other people in her life, so she can be a different person in different situations, but none of them are her.
Like a chameleon.
Exactly, yeah, I think she even used that word. And through learning that she has autistic traits or is autistic, or, you know, however you want to describe it, she has started to realize how well she masks herself. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about with social anxiety and having confidence to just be yourself. And she talks about learning to just be herself and be comfortable with being herself. And you know, have people having to accept who she is. So that's masking and confidence and social anxiety. And back to the sex drive, her book is fantastic. She specializes in the female cycle, the female menstrual cycle, and there's a large part of her book about females and the female sex drive, and how actually, whilst there are some females who have a very high sex drive and really keen to regularly have sex, actually there's a large proportion of females who really only have that desire for a few days of the month, often around ovulation. And what she really recommends, and I like to recommend as a result of her recommendations with my clients, is cycle tracking. And I mean, I recommend this for everything from anxiety to weight loss, to, you know, so many different things. You know, I've certainly worked with people who have tracked their, who have come to me with real severe anxiety difficulties and have tracked their cycle and realized that actually they're experiencing that anxiety at a certain point in their cycle, every cycle. And you know,
relief, and so because when you're anxious and you don't know why, you really want to know why. One of the things I always say to clients is it doesn't matter. It matters less why you feel anxious. What's most important is how you treat yourself when you have anxiety. But actually, when somebody has some, you know, when they have a reason, or they can acknowledge, that's what's going on for me, there's a lot of relief.
Totally. So cycle tracking, I think, is brilliant. What this person on this email may find, if she's female, is that she is she is feeling like she wants to have intercourse maybe 2 days of the month, and that's okay, and that's normal, and if she works out what those 2 days are, then maybe those days can become special days in the month for her. I think that this might not be the case, because she did mention that but I say she, we don't know, do we? But the person mentioned that this has happened after losing a job.
Yes.
And the sex drive prior to the job was very different.
Sounds like
so something's happened as a result of losing the job. That could be confidence. It's really difficult to, like you said before, oppression isn't sexy. It's really quite difficult to feel sexy when you've got no confidence as well.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know. Say when they had a job, they went out for a couple of drinks every evening after work with colleagues, and came home, on a bit of a high, oxytocin fueled, and that might have made a difference. So there's so many different things that could be making a difference. I'd certainly start with cycle tracking though, and then maybe just see if there's little things in life, other than the fact that they've gone from a job to no job, if there's other little aspects in life that are different, like perhaps nights out. And actually, the job loss was in the summer, and whilst lockdown started last spring, again, is it a result of lockdown? When we're oxytocin is our feel-good hormone, the love hormone, makes us happy, makes us want to love, and we get oxytocin as well when we interact with others, and I certainly feel more oxytocin fueled when I've had a night out with friends and had a great time, or really connected with somebody. And so, it may have coincided with the job loss, but could be simply related to no social interaction.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And it goes back to think about co-regulation, because there's so many things have been removed. And I would say as well that something like losing a job, now I don't know how the job was lost, but if it was sudden, if it was a shock, when we have a shock, we go into the freeze response, and when we go into the freeze response, it's a real shutdown, and it may be that you haven't come out of that shutdown response, and sometimes it can be our little libido that does shut down,
or even anxiety about not having a job.
Yes, exactly. So, again, stress affects your libido. Stress, on my team, I have 2 sex therapists, sex coaches rather, and they talk a lot about how stress works. Stress affects your sex drive. So the stress of losing a job, the stress of, I don't know whether you might get another one, or looking for another one, all of those things. And then you've got to remember that we've got this allostatic stress, I think it's called, or allopathic allostatics, one of them, allostatic stress, I think, which is this kind of the stress of everybody else and everything else going on around us. So that could also well be impacting on that. Now, I'm just going to refer to this part as it really upsets me, as my partner had a really good sexual relationship. Well, that's wonderful, and the fact that you had that together for years is wonderful, which means that you had a good connection and there wasn't a lot of resentments building up. So I always say it's resentments that kills sex drive when you've been together for a while, not the amount of time together, which is a bit of a sort of a belief that people have. And I'm really concerned it's going to affect things. I assume you mean from that, things in the relationship. Well, the first thing I would do is suggest that you talk to your partner about that. It sounds like you have a good thing going on and a good supportive partner there. So I think it's really important to talk to them about it. I know it can feel really unsexy to talk, there's this premise that it's really unsexy to talk about sex, but actually I think it's really, really important to be able to do that in a relationship. And even though it can feel quite scary, it can be one of those things that you just sort of brush under the carpet and just sort of put to the side. I think it's really important to talk about that, because if you have gone into that freeze response, it will help you unfreeze, or talk to someone about it if it isn't your partner, and look at what that might have happened. Now, if we're talking from the male perspective, a lot of men can worry about performance at this time. And of course, anxiety, thinking I must perform, I must be a good sexual partner. And if you've been under a lot of stress, whatever we put ourselves under pressure to do, to perform in any way, and there's a lot of anxiety behind it, it sort of creates that law of resistance type thing when the opposite happens. I talk about this all the time. I must go to sleep, we won't. You know, I mustn't be anxious, we will. I must perform well sexually. You know, we don't need that kind of pressure, especially when we're all under so much pressure anyway. So I think that's also something that's really important to take into consideration. We're talking from the male perspective. And I don't think you've got any reason to feel embarrassed. It's a common thing for sexual desire to go when we're under a lot of stress and pressure, and we all have, most of us have been, the majority have been. The world is in a very difficult place. We've got a very difficult, you know, background and foreground going on, and I think that it's really important you don't beat yourself up about it. And you know, when something like anxiety happens, or there's an interruption, if you like, in any of our natural sort of processes, so sexual desire or sleep or you know, the way we eat or something like that, we can start to get really worried about the fact that it's never going to come back, that we're always going to be like that. And actually, the most important thing is to realize is that you've just been under stress and something has been interrupted. And when we're under stress, some of these natural processes can get messed up, just going back to the cycle thing. Stress can mess up a menstrual cycle. So just realize it's an interruption. Make sure you get some support around it for yourself. If you can, talk to your partner about it. And then I would just suggest as well, just not putting yourself under any pressure around sex, but just gently, I don't know if you're doing this with your partner yet or not, but just connecting with touch and cuddling and intimacy in other ways that might not necessarily be sexual, so you can start building up to it and feeling comfortable. Now, you might be doing that already, but it's just a good way in, and just for you to start feeling safe, and that can, when you feel safe, you can start to find that window back into desire. And of course, that's also looking at ways to help you feel safe in your life as well. I don't know whether you've got a new job or whether you're still looking for one, but getting some support around that, because the safer we feel, the more relaxed, you know, more likely we are to do things like feel desire and be able to connect with those, you know, more pleasurable feelings. So the most important thing is to make yourself feel as safe as possible in your relationship and with yourself as well. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point that you said about safety. Yeah. And I mean, this is certainly something I've been discussing recently in my work, and how when you have that sexual intimacy, you almost have to relinquish control, not of your choices or your decisions, but of yourself a little bit, in your thoughts, and be very much in the moment. Mm-hmm. And with anxiety, I mean, we don't know whether there is anxiety in this situation, but you know, potentially with a job loss, that, you know, that does often bring anxiety, and you know, that anxious thinking, always thinking, you know, into the future, into the past, not being able to switch off. And so, you know, to kind of fully be in the moment, present in the moment, and just go with what your feelings, rather than thinking with your head, is quite difficult. And so maybe, you know, I always come back to this, but kind of meditation practice, just being in the moment, practicing being in the moment, so that they can do that and lose the anxiety and feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think it's like coming back into your body, you know, whatever you can do to come back into your body. And we've trotted this out before, and, you know, you can read this 1,000 times on the internet, you know, but it's all that thing of walk in nature, get into your body, ground as well, you know, because getting into your body. And because with sex, we can really start worrying about, you know, I don't know what's going on, if we're good enough with that, performing, you know, what we look like. And actually, the most important thing is to focus on what we're feeling like, what it feels like. Exactly, and that can be a way back in. So we hope that helps, and that, you know, the natural order is restored, and things can be, you know, we come back to a good equilibrium once we have the right support and we support ourselves in the right way. So I just want more than anything for you to be compassionate with yourself about it, and realize that it's not, you know, it's not a permanent thing. You know, these interruptions happen all the time, and then they can be restored as well. Okay, so we're going to jump over to the next question. Hi there, I have been working full-time in the NHS and not had a break since before Christmas. Oh gosh, it's exhausting. Me and my partner in the middle of a week's annual leave. We've been looking forward to this week for so long and looking forward to some good sleep and rest, but I've just felt thrown. Yeah, thrown is a really good word for how everybody actually has felt. We've been thrown and thrown and thrown and thrown, and been feeling like I'm jet lagged. Yes, I understand that feeling. Also waking up early hours of the morning, not being able to get back to sleep again due to anxious thoughts spiraling. I was wondering if this is because of the pandemic, and welcome any thoughts and advice. Well, yes, I mean, I think you're probably exhausted. And the thing is, you know, I always talk about this thing called tired and wired. So we feel really exhausted, but we also feel really adrenalized. So it's just, you know, we've been spent all day working. I can't wait to when I get home, I'm going to get into bed straight away. But then we don't. And then we just sort of like suddenly we've got this, we don't get into bed by a certain time. There's suddenly another adrenaline surge at like 11 p.m. I'm sure there's some science around this that I don't know the full facts on. But and then we can find ourselves staying up till 2 a.m. and not being able to sleep, or you know, feeling absolutely exhausted all day, and then getting into bed, and then it's like, you know, your brain just kicks into a million different worries and thoughts, you know, like, and there's things that's popping up like Jack in the Boxes, and it's it can be really, really challenging. So part of the thing is as well, there's a bit of a pressure there, isn't there? We've been looking forward to this week for so long. You
Massive pressure.
It's so pressured. I've got to sleep. It's got to be good. I've got to feel really rested. And here's the thing: it's really, really easy to get really wound up really quickly. You know, it's easy. It's easy for us to feel fear. It's easy for us to feel scared. You know, we are wired for survival. So, you know, something like 70% of our brain is sort of looking out for negative things in order to protect us. Now, it can take a lot longer to unwind, and it often takes a lot longer than a week, and we can have this big expectation of ourselves. Right, I'm going on holiday and then I'm going to feel amazing straight away. And actually, a lot of people go on holiday and they often become ill because their body just releases all that adrenaline and stress. So I think some of it's the pressure you put yourselves under around that. The jet lag is probably a bit of an adrenaline dump. It's when we go out of that fight flight stage and then we stop. And when we stop, we can suddenly feel really kind of the freeze response, which is that groggy, exhausted, jet lagged kind of feeling. And waking up early hours of the morning, I think it's always a sign of stress, waking up really, unless you're like this, my lovely lady here who loves waking up early. But you know, if you don't want to wake up early in the morning, that waking at 3 or 4 can be a real sign of stress in your body. So I would say that you're probably exhausted and you've been running on adrenaline for a long time, and that you need to allow yourself more than a week to slow down. Obviously, you've got to work within the parameters of your life, and you're working in the NHS, working extremely hard, as you all do. And yeah, in answer to your question, I do think it's because of the pandemic and everything that's been going on. Of course, you know, you've been under an enormous amount of pressure. We're not, you know, we can't be switched on and off. Our nervous systems get wound up quickly, and they take much longer to unwind. So first of all, take all the pressure off yourself to sleep, not sleep, or any of those things, to feel rested, and give yourself permission to unwind much more slowly, and realize that it will take time. And just again, I think, you know, I always think the antidote to anxiety is compassion and being really kind with yourself, and doing as many grounding, earthing, soothing things anyway. When we can't sleep, let yourself rest, read, you know, a book, not something with blue light, and have some compassion for yourself. You're really tired and we can't just switch ourselves on and off. What would you add, Julia?
I've got some thoughts. I hope they're going to come out as ordered as they were in my mind as you were speaking.
Yeah, no, they never do for me. I think, well, that's really good. And no, just come out from
I should have written notes. I think exactly like you say, this person has been fueled on adrenaline from before Christmas, you say, to now.
Yeah.
Has, for 2 reasons, has been needing the adrenaline to be able to keep going.
Yeah.
Because that is exhausting. And secondly, the kind of state of the NHS, or the fear of the NHS collapsing, you know, these. I know in some hospitals it's not been kind of horrendously busy. Other hospitals it's been mad. So if they're in a hospital where it's not busy, there's essentially permanently the fear of you know, like it's going to happen, we're going to get hit and we're not going to be able to cope. That kind of anticipatory fear of, you know, when is it going to hit us? If they're in the busy situation, then that fear of just keeping everyone in there going, and you know, that responsibility that must be on the hands of these people in a busy situation. So adrenaline, I think, fueled on adrenaline for those two reasons, and now suddenly has stopped, but the adrenaline doesn't go. You know, so you work a lot with trauma, and you know, that potentially is there right now, and the body is, this person's body, like you say, is probably still very much in that fight or flight, and not necessarily even, you know, I completely agree with what you're saying about it taking time to switch off, but there is also the fact that the brain has now been wired to believe that there is a threat right here, right now, and you know, that threat, that perceived threat, is going to keep that adrenaline pumping, and no one's going to sleep when they're in that fight or flight response. You know, why would the body let you sleep when you've got a threat to your life? So yeah, waking up early. I suspect as well, and this is a complete assumption, but working in the NHS all out, maybe shifts, and so the circadian rhythm potentially completely out, which means it's very difficult to then suddenly go back to kind of bed at 10 p.m, waking at 7 p.m, when you know, the rhythm has kind of been reset, but not really reset because it's still confused. I guess confused is the answer. So yeah, I think, like you say, it's going to take more than a week to just calm everything, to calm the amygdala, you know, calm the fear response in the brain, just stop these hormones pumping through, get the circadian rhythm back on track. Hopefully there's not going to be another long stint for this person without a break. And
yeah, that's what I was thinking, because this is the thing, it's kind of like, you know, it's always working within, they're always talking about this, we work within the parameters with which we have to, and it's kind of, I suppose the invitation here as well is because is to work out how you can introduce more ease, calm, grounding, soothing, self-parenting, self-regulation into your lives, so that you don't have to go into these kind of like, you know, there's suddenly the brakes are screeched on, and then just because we consciously know that we've got this week off, our body and our subconscious don't catch up in that way. They just don't.
Oh, no.
You know? It's very slow, so we have to be really soothing with ourselves, and sometimes we have to go for a bit of a period of just feeling a bit rubbish and anxious whilst our system starts to slow down. But if you know, I work a lot with anxiety, and I always say to my clients, like, you know, if you keep giving, or where they're coming out of a lot of anxiety, if you keep doing good things for yourself, even if, say for example, you know, we suggest a simple self-care thing, like, you know, lay in the bath rather than getting a shower, because it's more soothing. And they'll often say, well, lay in the bath, my heart was pounding and all these thoughts racing around my head. And I said, well, that's, you know, that's okay, because if you keep doing it, after a while you will start to relax. You know, you have to act as if a little bit in the first place. So sometimes you might have to act as if you're resting in order to give your system the message that you're resting, and then after a while your system will start to receive the message, I'm resting, and that you're doing something new, but you're changing gear. So
I wonder if there's been some pressure as well to do worthwhile things in the daytime. So whilst they're allowing themselves rest and sleep, whether it's been needing to do day trips and things that feel productive, not work-wise, but you know, trips and things like that they've not been able to do at normal time off. And maybe it's a case of sleeping in the day as well, you know, sleeping when they feel tired, rather than trying to
Yeah, we can do that, can't we? We can put someone under massive pressure. I've got to do this thing. I've got a week off. I've got to go out for a really long walk. I've got to go because the pub beer gardens are open. I've got to make sure I go with them, and I've got to see the people that I haven't been able to see. And actually, we don't have to do anything. You know, these shoulds can be really, really unhelpful. But you think, oh, it's sunny, I must go outside, and actually, I just want to stay inside. And you know, I always talk about, you know, the importance of a duvet day. Like, if you're going to have a duvet day, sometimes you just don't want to get out of bed. Make it a nice duvet day. Don't lie there beating yourself up things you should be doing, and everyone else is out there and it's sunny, and you know, better get out there before we get locked down again or whatever. It's like, you know, if you need a duvet day, make it a nice duvet day. Make it soothing and make it self-parenting for yourself. And you know, again, you know, wake up in the morning and ask, okay, what does my body need today? Sometimes your body just needs to lie on the sofa. It really does. And then that way you're giving yourself some rest. Obviously, you don't want to be doing that for the rest of your life, and you won't be. That's always the fear. But you know, sometimes you just need to, when you've been running 100 miles an hour, you just need to flop. But I used to do that thing all the time. I'd go like 100 miles an hour, and then I'd stop, and I'd wonder why I didn't feel immediately relaxed. You know, it's so unreasonable. It's me to myself, you know, and it's kind of like, now, just relax. I was shouting at myself. Okay, we hope that helps. Okay, going to jump on over to this other question, which is a really important one, as they all are. Good evening, all. I've had a recent diagnosis of complex PTSD. After childhood sexual abuse, I'm currently going to a weekly therapy session with a therapist I feel very comfortable with, which is great, but I feel quite overwhelmed with the diagnosis. I didn't think my abuse was bad enough to cause me to get something like this. Okay, I just want to.
Sorry, we did this question last week. So
did you
last week?
Okay. So
you're going to have a different input because you weren't here with Neil and I. So I think it's really important that you give your insight as well. Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. All right. So sorry for repeating ourselves, but you know, I think it is an important one because there's actually a lot more complex PTSD around than we realise, you know, and it's what I specialise in. I didn't think my abuse was bad enough to cause me to get something like this. This is the second large flare-up I've had, the symptoms, and it's exhausting. What main points do I need to know about managing this? Is there anything I can do on a daily basis to try and ease the symptoms, as I'm trying to break my current go-to of masking, running away from how I think or feel, or drinking? Yeah, drinking is, you know, common. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, so having that question answered again. So what I would say to you is, first of all, this thing about I didn't think my abuse was bad enough to cause me to get something like this. One of the coping mechanisms when you've experienced sexual abuse and have treated it extensively is that we minimise. We do this thing of we're minimising in order to cope. It's like a sort of form of denial. And I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who hasn't first come in and minimised it at some level for themselves. It's often been minimised by those around them as well. And what I want to say is that anything like this, you know, any inappropriate touching of any kind, any violation of a boundary when you are small or even when you're an adult, you know, it can cause serious harm and have a profound impact on the psyche and on the system, and can of course cause PTSD. It's really important not to minimize your own abuse, and I would imagine that the therapist that you're working with is gently acknowledging that with you. By that, I want to be careful there and say, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to live in that place forever, but I don't think we can ever really heal anything until we acknowledge it fully. So by acknowledging it fully, which means we need to stop minimizing. So I'm sure your therapist is talking to you about this, but it's just something that I would want to sort of reinforce here. So it's common amongst abuse survivors to somehow think that their abuse wasn't bad enough to warrant the way they're feeling now, and other people have gone through worse things, etc., etc., etc. That's what is very, very common. And again, I think probably a bit of a defense coping mechanism. It doesn't matter what anyone else has gone through or whether their abuse was worse or deemed worse or lesser than yours. What matters is how you've responded, and any serious transgression, violation of boundary will cause, can cause, of course, the symptoms of complex PTSD, which is splitting off into fight, flight, freeze and fawn in an attempt for your system
system to cope with a serious violation. So I want you to bring some compassion to yourself, first of all. Complex PTSD is a diagnosis. The things with complex PTSD, it's not something, I don't think it's a diagnosis that you have to live with forever. That's not my personal belief around it. I think it's a series of responses that you can heal from, and it takes work, and it takes patience, and it takes time. And anyone that tells you that you should be able to resolve complex PTSD quickly is, I don't believe, coming from a place of really fully understanding what complex PTSD is, or integrity. I think it takes time, and I think it takes a lot of compassion for yourself. The main points that you need to know about managing this, well, I always recommend this book, Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. He's the absolute Don, I think, talking about this. You're going to be managing triggers, and you're going to be managing flashbacks. There can be a lot of symptoms of CPTSD, sleeplessness, using drugs and drink to escape from it, high anxiety, hypervigilance, flashes of anger, and obviously with things like complex PTSD, there can be a lot of mini triggers. You know, sometimes even a good feeling can be a trigger. It can be a trigger for a panic attack. It can be a smell, a sound, a sight. You know, we get all these sorts of things. Now, as you continue working with your therapist, you will find that these symptoms start to hopefully reduce. The most important thing you can do is make sure you're with safe people as much as you can be. Make sure you have safe people to talk to as well as your therapist. Huge self-care. The other thing that comes with complex PTSD, unfortunately, is that it gives you this really, well, you know, there's lots of different terms, but like they're really harsh inner critic, but I would say the persecutory superego. So you have this really harsh voice, inner voice that will criticize you all the time, and can say things like you're worthless, not good enough. And that comes from this place of having experienced trauma, and there's a part of yourself that sort of collapses. And that's what, as you work with complex PTSD, that's what you will be building up, the part of you that has collapsed through due to the trauma, who believes, for example, I'm defective, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, other people are better than me, etc., etc. Often does a real compare and despair. Ways of dealing with this persecutory superego is to get angry at it, to tell it to shut up, try and imagine that, you know, would I ever speak to my best friend like that? Realize that that white noise of the persecutory superego, that constant self-criticism and attack, that is the result of unhealed trauma. As the trauma is healed, and as you grieve what you've gone through and process that grief, that will start to reduce. So that will happen quite naturally with the therapeutic process, and on a sort of day-to-day basis, telling, you know, the superego, the inner critic that tells you all these terrible things about yourself, swear at it, tell it to go away, get angry with it. Not today, Satan. It's a good one to just put it back in its box. All of these things, everyone's got a bit of an inner critic to some extent, because, you know, no one was fully met in childhood. And a question I always get asked is, you know, how, you know, can you get that voice all the way down? Can you remove it completely? And I don't think you can, but I think you can get it right down. It's sneaky, it will come back. You get it down in one area, it attacks you in another area. But self-care, working with the superego and doing the grief work, working with your therapist. You don't need to be overwhelmed by the diagnosis, because complex PTSD is something that you heal from. It's a series of trauma responses, and as you heal the whole of you, and you will start to heal all of these triggers, and things will start to come together. That's why I love the book Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, because it is such a beautiful journey. It's his own journey. He recovered from really severe complex PTSD himself, and is in this place now where he's got this really quite championing inner voice which tells him good things. It's just so rewarding. He worked really hard on it, but it's a first-hand account, which is nice. It's not some sort of dry textbook experience, which is just kind of like, that's not what you want. You want to be working with a therapist who's met themselves. They can meet you as deeply as they've met themselves, you know, and you want to be doing this kind of deep work. Lots of rest, lots of self-care, creativity, surround yourself by kind people. and just know that it's a journey and that you can absolutely recover from it. And you know what, if you recovering from PTSD, will make you probably stronger, wiser, more self-loving, more flexible than someone who hadn't even had it in the first place, if you do work really hard at your recovery. And that's also what I would say, throw everything at your recovery. Just be like, without exhausting yourself, but just focus on your recovery, and make your recovery the most important thing. And also realize that recovery is not a linear ascent. It's going to be jagged. You're going to go forward and think, yeah, I've got that bit nailed, and then you're going to get hit back. And the thing is with recovery from anything is that it's not that we don't go back there to the sort of pit of where we used to feel, is that we go back there for a shorter time. So we go back there for an hour rather than a day. We go back there for a day rather than a month, a month rather than a year. So as you recover, excuse me, that's what will start to happen. And well, I would just say, I just commend your bravery and courage. I know, it's a big thing to work with, but know that you can absolutely live a really good life if you get the right support and put the time in. Quite a long answer there.
I think that's a really thorough answer. And just, you said about throwing everything into the recovery, and I think that's something that I didn't think about when we answered it last week. This person said that they are working with a therapist. Sometimes you need more than one therapist, and I don't mean switching from hypnotherapist to hypnotherapist, but hypnotherapist, a nutritional therapist, a bodywork therapist, a yoga, a holistic approach. That's just something to consider.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think, feeding yourself goodness from all directions, in all parts of you, the whole of you in all directions, giving yourself the opposite of what you experienced, basically. What heal, again, I keep talking about compassion because but compassion heals anxiety, and compassion also heals shame. And with PTSD and sexual abuse, and there's always a lot of shame, and that will gradually go, and you will feel freer and freer to live the life that you really deserve to live. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I hope that helps. Just got a really short one here from somebody that says, I have really bad anxiety. Anxiety is such an issue at the moment, isn't it? And I keep picking at my skin and I can't stop. My face is starting to look really horrible. I keep scanning my skin. I think lots of parents have done this before, so I really understand this one. I keep scanning my skin for bumps and just picking, even though there's nothing there. And I'm starting to really affect my appearance. What do you suggest that I do? I'll give this one to you, Julia.
Yeah, it's a tricky one and not something that I know loads about, but just a couple of things really that I would say. This kind of thing becomes habitual. So, I think there's more reasons to it and a greater depth to it than that, but it certainly becomes a habit. So that's tricky, it's got to focus on breaking the habit, but it's that kind of doing something with the hands, isn't it? And some people, I know a lot about motor stereotypes, and that involves, lots of hand movements and fiddling with things, and it can be, a bit of a calming, like a self-regulation. And so, yeah, I mean, focusing on different ways to self-regulate rather than skin picking. There's other things that can be done with the hands, fiddling with a stress ball. Yes. So many different things. Yeah. But because the skin picking is unhealthy, I'm working with someone actually right now who is doing similar but with hair.
Yeah.
And
trichomania, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's more fiddling, but rather than pulling, but the fiddling causes the hair to fall out.
Yeah.
And that then is an unhealthy habit. And it's not that these things are necessarily unhealthy in general. Playing with your hair isn't unhealthy, but when your hair starts to fall out as a result, then that doesn't feel great.
When it segues over into self-destruction. And I think as well, I always say this about this one as well, just, there's obviously a lot of, trying to get stress out of your body. So other ways to get stress out of your body, I talk about this thing about having an adult tantrum. You don't have to do it when anyone's around. In fact, I would recommend that you don't. But lie on the floor, just thump, you know, safely, or lie on the bed and make sure you're physically safe, and get the stress out of your system. Exercise, because, you know, you're trying to self-soothe and you're trying to release. They're the subconscious drivers, and the conscious manifestation is the picking. So there's something to release. I mean, and there's something to release that through writing. It's sometimes having a really good cry. You know, we forget how good we feel sometimes. We just have a really good cry, a really good rant. You know, it releases a stress hormone when we cry. Boxing, running, you know, creativity, getting these things out of your system, and like Juliet says, finding, you know, other ways to self-soothe that don't have a destructive hangover of any kind. That really is the secret to self-care. It's self-soothing without a destructive hangover. Self-soothing that still feels nice the next morning. You don't feel guilty because you've maxed out your credit card, or, you know, drunk 3 bottles of Pinot Grigio, or, you know, whatever else destructive things we can do. There's plenty of them, isn't there? Yeah, I agree. I think it's self-soothing.
Did they say when they're doing it? Sorry, I missed that in the question.
No, they haven't.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing to try and note the times. Is it to aid concentration? Is it boredom? In fact, something I've been speaking about in my work is this constant kind of thing we have with our phones when we're not doing, you know, we are becoming so used to picking our phones up and scrolling when we're not doing anything else with our hands.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to people who are, you know, watching TV and still scrolling through the phone whilst watching TV. You know, it's
I've done that.
It's just, we've all done it. You know, it's becoming so ingrained, and it's not, we're not born doing it. We're not born needing to distract ourselves in this way. But the less used to being, you know, just doing nothing we are, the more we need to do something. And so, you know, there's the possibility that this is becoming a habit because there's nothing else to do with the hands, and this person has just got so used to doing something with the hands, maybe through phone use, that they need to do something with the hands. But the other thing I was thinking about, I just wanted to check, and we can't check because it's, you know, just a written in question, but check whether that there's no kind of self-harm type situation going on, whether that picking is you know, creating feelings or something, you know, in the way that self-harm does. It's just something to consider for that listener. You know,
yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of the band, because it can slip over into that, you know, it can slip over into that. So it's just something to be aware of. But I would suggest you try those things, and if not, then I suggest getting some support with it to get some help. So listen, we're probably coming around. That's our last question for today, but we look forward to seeing you next week. Look after yourselves as best you can. Enjoy the sunshine while it's here, and the freedom whilst it's here too, and make the most of everything right now, and just wishing you all a really great week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice being warm.
Yes, makes a difference, doesn't get less. It
makes a massive difference.
Yeah,
great.
Goodbye, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.